All right, man, what a week. What a week it's been. Look, on paper, the First Descendant should very much be a game that I love. It is a looter shooter with a variety of PvE. You got horde mode missions, dungeons, and boss battles, just to name a few. We're grinding for gear. We got cool characters to customize via this mod system. We got the shared open world spaces with other people running around. I mean, this checks a lot of boxes for me and is very similar to games that I've sunk a load of time into, including the obvious ones like Warframe, Destiny, and Division, but also I've enjoyed some of the less popular games people think are bad, like Defiance, Firefall, and Outriders. And I was hoping really that the First Descendant would be another one of those games just to add to my list. But after playing a bunch between the pre-release beta test and now for a few days post-launch, I gotta say, it's just not hitting the mark. I don't love it. I don't hate it either. Well, I do hate parts of it, which we'll get to, but I also think it does a few things quite well, and that's why I'm not surprised there are a lot of people enjoying this game. For starters, like, the gameplay generally feels really good. This notoriously can be difficult for third-person shooters. They tend to lack that sense of impact compared to a lot of first-person shooting games. It's not perfect, no, but I would say that shooting and using abilities is pretty snappy and fairly well done. In fact, I think the highest praise that I would give this game, the best thing that it does, is in fact the gameplay feeling good. And that's a big deal. And on a similar note, I think the movement is well done too. At a baseline, every single class has the ability to sprint, double jump, mantle terrain, and then use a grappling hook. The big thing with this game though is the fact that it accounts for and carries over momentum. So when you're using your grapple hook, like, you can really fly around the environment. Starting from a sprint, you can jump and then hook onto like any part of the terrain or objects. And then while you're flying towards your target, you've got this horizontal control that lets you slightly move left or right. This allows you to basically launch yourself around the side of your target, carrying that momentum with you, and then you follow that up with a second grapple hook some distance away. I mean, you can really just be flying all over the place. It's just a lot of fun to use, especially when that is coupled with a Descendant who already has built-in mobility, like any leaps or any move speed enhancement. It can just be a whole heck of a lot of fun sprinting and swinging around. Another thing that I've enjoyed is the class design. Like, yes, there are some pretty generic characters. Like, you got the basic shooter dude bro, you got the turret guy, you got the one dude who tosses out grenades, you got Elsa, but then there's characters like Bunny. Now, she's been getting a lot of attention for reasons other than her playstyle, but genuinely, I think she's like one of the coolest design classes that I've played in a looter shooter. I'm being serious here. The class is built around the concept of charging up this electric meter and then using it to deal massive area of effect damage. So as you run, you store up this built electricity, and then your various abilities will deal increased damage based on your charge level. So this includes things like lightning emission, which will pulsate AoE damage for every 7 meters you move, or Thrill Bomb, where you can get an extra burst of AoE damage on call. And then on top of that, after landing from a double jump, you also deal additional AoE damage. And then you couple those mechanics with the Speed of Light ability, which increases your run speed 50%. And the faster you run, the quicker you build up electricity, and then the more frequently you're pulsating those every 7 meter AoE explosions. It's just crazy, dude. You can also couple this with the grapple hook, and for every 7 meters you move while grappling, you will also pulsate additional damage. The end result, like playing this character when all the pieces come together, is you're running around constantly at 150% move speed, then grapple hooking all over the place to get additional bursts of AoE damage every 7 meters you ever move, and then pulsating additional AoE damage on top of that, all while double jumping, because whenever you land, you do more AoE damage. And it's just crazy. Like, it's a real lot of fun, interesting class design. Then we've got the boss fights that are known as Void Intercept battles. These I've found varied and interesting. Outside of the fact that every one of them take place in this like single digital arena, I actually thought overall these boss encounters are really good. Interesting mechanics with multiple phases. Even the first couple of boss fights, because you unlock them as you level up. The first few ones can be quite challenging, and it just gets even harder from there. They look cool, they're well animated, and some of them, especially later on, actually really require coordination and effort with your group. I also like the world and environments. It kind of reminds me a bit of Anthem or Skyforge, if you ever played that heap. Another bad game that I enjoyed. Lots of cool looking like ancient structures and ruins. They got the sci-fi twist all throughout, and they're in these varied settings and locations. You've got like mountainous regions with the European inspired architecture, deserts with lots of craggy rocks and metallic industrial buildings, foggy forests that remind me a lot of like the Pacific Northwest area of the US. I mean, all around, it's a cool play space. There's cool structures, a cool setting, maybe a tad generic feeling at times, but overall I enjoyed moving around this world. Top of that too, I think the graphics are pretty solid. solid. Like the launch update, I think it looks good. The game ran really well for me. And then just finally, like I do like the general structure of the game, right? So you got those shared open world spaces. I've always been a fan of this, running around, fighting enemies, doing quests, and then just having random people show up and all of a sudden you're working together to complete this one objective. It's a lot of fun. You go around the world from one quest marker to another, you then clear the zone, and then at the end you basically get what is a dungeon run. You finish that, you move on to the next zone, and that's the progress through this game, interwoven with some story. On top of that, you can do void intercept battles in between. They're actually required as you progress, as well as things like special operation missions for grinding resources and materials. And then you're also working on your character. You're equipping new weapons when they come up. You're playing with your mods, tinkering your build via that system, enhancing it through other means. And hey, if you like grindy loot games, this is a grindy loot game. There's a lot of different things to grind, especially those 1 to 3% drop chance items you need to unlock certain descendants and weapons, but that's another story which we will get to here in a second. But yeah, as I said, there's plenty I think this game does well. I should enjoy the First Descendant. This video should be, dude, I'm hyped. This game's awesome. I love it. But I don't. And there's a few reasons why. For starters, many of the issues that I had back in early beta tests have persisted through launch. And I'm not just gonna complain here, I will provide feedback as we move throughout as well. So there's some smaller things. Like for one, there's just a lot of rough edges around this game. Things like animation, sound effects, even like the ambient noise. None of this struck me as particularly good. I think this stuff, yeah, it's just a little rough. Also the dialogue, I mean, this is just flat out bad. Like it's not, the VL, the dialogue is not good. Also pretty sure it's not synced up with mouth movement unless I was having a stroke the entire time I was playing this game. Also, the game feels kind of stiff across the board. It's a little harder to pin this one down. I can't really find the exact words, but I would just say something about the way like the characters and enemies move, NPC animations. There's like a lack of natural feel to it all. Just not fluid enough, maybe just not enough to those animations, not enough keyframes. Is that a word for it? I don't know, but is any of this game breaking? No, not really, but again, it is what I would call rough around the edges. Simple fix here, just continue polishing the game, work on this stuff, improve it as time goes on with patches, easy, right? The biggest hangups for me though, I don't know if they're going to address these, but maybe we'll see. Okay, so the open world, it still feels lifeless. This was the case in the beta. People told me it was addressed and they fixed it. I've not really seen that in the past 3 days while playing. Fact is, if you or someone in the instance of the zone that you're in hasn't started a quest, there's just absolutely nothing happening in these open zones. There's nothing going on. You're not seeing roaming packs of NPCs, not even static groups taking hold in locations. There's no dynamic events occurring, no puzzles to solve. There's no wildlife running around, those little flourishes that really add to a game feeling alive and full. Literally nothing is happening on these maps. It's all just flat, dead landscape. And I don't mean flat like technically flat. I just mean like it's like flatlined. It just feels dead unless someone has started a quest. The world only populates with objectives, with enemies, with events if you, or like I said, another player in your instance, if someone starts a mission at those static markers, that then will spawn in specific enemies and objectives for a mission. Whereas, for example, take a look at Destiny. This game gets compared to that a lot. Whenever you go into a zone in Destiny, the entire zone is full of activity from the start. Things are happening. NPCs are holding up locations. There are packs roaming around. You got public events constantly going off. And then if a player starts the mission equivalent in Destiny, if a player starts a patrol in Destiny, that then adds another layer on top of what already feels like a vibrant lived-in world. Recommendation for the First Descendant: populate the world, fill it with stuff beyond what happens when someone begins a mission. Also, I would say visually, I thought the play space in the world feels a bit sparse, and specifically I'm talking about the amount and the density of things in the environment, things like foliage and trees and buildings. It just all feels a little light, and also the scaling's a little weird. It kind of makes the game feel a little dated, despite the fact that it does graphically look pretty good. Recommendation here, fill the play space so it feels less like a diorama and more like a living video game world that we're moving through. My second major problem with the game right now has been the quest design is just straight up boring. I'm really specifically honing in on the pacing here. So as you play through the game, like I mentioned, you're moving through zones, going from one quest marker to another. You complete them all, you do a little dungeon, and then you move on to the next zone. Maybe you get got to go back to town, but that's the general flow. Every quest you do, no matter the zone that you're in, it's all like the same 4 things. They're either saying kill things, defend a location, collect stuff and bring it back, or capture a location, static or moving. Every single quest in the game, in every single zone, boils down to these 4 things. Now, this is pretty standard stuff, right? This isn't unique to the First Descendant. Most MMOs, most looter shooters, quests boil down to those 4 basic things. My biggest issue is the pacing is very, very bad. It's too slow. While you're playing, for starters, everything dies incredibly fast as you're going through that initial progression. This changes as you move into the harder modes and as you play higher level, like the horde mode missions. Things aren't dying very quickly, but as you're going through the zones, there's just so much downtime. You're killing things instantly, and there's so much downtime between respawns, between timers counting down, between things moving. The result of which, frankly, was just unengaging and a lot of time just standing around feeling pretty bored because there wasn't anything to do. We were just waiting for a timer to tick down. A group of enemies would show up. We would one-shot them like in less than 5 seconds, and then we would be standing there waiting another 20 or 30 seconds for respawns. So my recommendation here would be to up the pacing of enemy spawns. I think that would go a long way. You don't even have to make like enemies way harder while you were leveling up. I understand like leveling is face roll in a lot of games, right? That's part of the process. The hard part doesn't come to end game. If you want to keep a face roll, fine, but like increase the density of monsters or the frequency of spawns or something so that we're just spending less time just like standing there, just staring around in space. Like it just really made it unengaging. And along those same lines, the boss design everywhere outside of those void intercept battles, which I think are good, the boss design everywhere else is really bad. I'd like it to introduce you to the First Descendant's boss design philosophy. We call it the 3 orbs philosophy. Take any boss, doesn't matter what its faction is, how it looks, what sort of weapons or skill it has, take that boss, break its health bar into 3 to 4 sections, and then make them invulnerable every time players break through one of those sections until they destroy the 3 floating orbs, either destroy them outright or destroy them in a particular order or destroy them all at the same time. 3 orbs, invulnerable boss, kill those orbs, done. 90% of the boss encounters in the game. Like I couldn't believe it. After like my 100th boss of seeing this exact mechanic, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Just make the, 3 orbs. That was their design philosophy outside the void intercept battles, because those are really, really cool. My next big thing, and this is a real sticking point here, is that just so blatantly obvious, and this is the case in a lot of grind games, but it feels especially so here. Progression is just clearly artificially stretched out to try to push us towards the cash shop. There's no doubt here with the things like the 24-hour build timers. Gee, I would like to skip those. Oh, I can buy doing that? Great. Or the fact that you've got those a lot of those enhancement materials that you really need for progression, the activators and exchangers and more. Or you got the 1 to 3% drop rates when trying to farm the materials needed for this stuff, which can take players, I don't know, I've seen people saying like upwards of 100 or so hours. I don't have a lot of feedback for this part of the thing, this artificial inflation of progression pushing you towards the monetization. Don't really have feedback here because, let's be honest, this is all done on purpose. This is the repetitive nature of especially free-to-play games, especially free-to-play MMO lights or MMOs. Games are made worse to sell you the solution, right? You've heard that time and time again, that is absolutely the case here. And that leads me to the final thing that I want to talk about: monetization. Now, I'm not going to run through all of the numbers. Plenty of people have already done that. Let me just put it this way. It's like they took inspiration from Warframe. You hear people saying, it's just like Warframe, it's just like Warframe. No. It's like they took the inspiration from Warframe in terms of how they're monetizing the different aspects of the customization and progression. Like, yes, there are a lot of similarities, direct parallels you can draw between Warframe and the First Descendant. But it's like they said, okay, we'll take that baseline. How can we make this worse while simultaneously making more money? That right there pretty much covers exactly how they've monetized this game. Here's some examples, right? Buying Descendants requires you purchasing 2 bundles of premium currency because the Descendants cost slightly more than what a single bundle of premium currency gives you. This is a tried and true anti-consumer premium currency conversion tactic. You sell bundles that reward barely less than what it is you know people are gonna want to buy. It's scummy, it's always scummy, it's scummy here as well. Or you got the armor dyes that are single use, like at least in Warframe, when you purchase a color palette, you can use it as much as you like, however many frames you're trying to customize, whatever parts of it you want to customize. But in this game, you buy 1 dye, you customize 1 part, The die is gone. You lost it. The paint can ran out just like that. Then there's just the fact that aspects of the grind itself put even Warframe to shame, at least for certain things. And I think the big one that a lot of people you've seen pointing out is the fact that ultimate characters require you to farm missions with 3% drop reward chances for the part that you want in order for you to even be able to make that ultimate character. If you're not familiar with Warframe or the First Descendant, both games have versions of the characters, the playable classes that are just like, there's the base version and then the ultimate version, which is just a better iteration of that, right? So people want the ultimate one because it's the base one, but just better, flat out. If you're trying to farm that for free, you're looking at repeating missions over and over again with as low as a 3% drop rate. That's very low, let me just tell you, that's very low. Or there's the doubling your mod capacity, and this is one of the biggest sources of power in both games, in Warframe and in the First Descendant. However, in First Descendant, the equivalent of the Warframe version, it's 20 times more expensive. Real world money only, by the way, for doing this. That's the only way you can double your mod capacity. Also, one big note and omission that hasn't been included in a lot of this conversation is the fact that Warframe allows for trading, so you can get these things that cost premium currency in Warframe by trading with other players. No such thing exists in the First Descendant. People will often reference the fact that Nexon has promised they will eventually look at possibly adding trading in the future. Shouldn't exactly be completely putting our trust in Nexon for a reason we'll get to right here. In general, the game's monetization model revolves around having, like I said, really long grinds for stuff that you are likely to want, and then selling you the means of skipping that grind conveniently in the cash shop, with a low % chance for drop rate just being one example, one means of doing that. And that's also if you can even trust Nexon's stated drop rates. Hint, you can't, or you shouldn't put full confidence in it, because I'd like to remind you, if you were unaware as well, a mere 6 months ago, Nexon was fined $9 million by the Korean FTC. Why? Well, because after an investigation, it was revealed that Nexon was essentially scamming customers for over a decade. So it's been known for a while by people who play their games that Nexon has some of like the worst monetization, some of the most anti-consumer monetization practices in the industry. Nexon games have been known for that. It's not unheard of prior to this whole $9 million fine debacle. But this story was on a whole nother level. So the TLDR of the situation is this. Nexon sold in MapleStory what are essentially loot boxes that reward players these powerful stat boosts. So you would purchase and open these items called cubes, and when you opened it, you would get a random chance and rewarded multiple boosts in power for your character. Well, there was a particular combination of outcomes that most players wanted from these cubes. Basically, it was a really strong boost that pretty much benefited everybody. It's a lot of the reason is what fueled a lot of these cube purchases. People wanted this one particular outcome for a powerful stat boost for their character. It turns out, in their investigation, the Korean FTC learned that for a time over the course of a decade, that reward that people were essentially gambling on to get, that was never possible. The thing that many people wanted, that most powerful outcome of these cubes, could never be obtained. You could buy 1 billion cubes, and within this window of time, the probability of getting it was goose egg, actually 0. That is crazy, and that is exactly why they got fined $9 million, or the equivalent of $9 million, because this was in Korea. Also, if you're curious, none of that money went back to the customers, by the way. Wow, what a surprise. And you know, hey, it's a free-to-play game. They got to make money somehow. Of course, I'm not saying they shouldn't be charging money for anything in this game, right? I don't expect games to just be free. In fact, my dream world is that free-to-play model vanishes and we go back to box prices and we get rid of all of this other garbage that's been pulled from the game, stripped from the games, these games being made worse for them to sell us the solution. That would be my dream. That dream ain't ever happening because I'm not delusional. I understand we're not going back to that. I also understand lowering the barrier to entry and free to play, it is a boon for a lot of people, and it brings a lot more players to the game, and it certainly has more people playing the game than would otherwise, whatever the reason, right? A free to play game means more access for more people for the game, and that is a good thing. But I will say, there are ways of doing free-to-play monetization and not having it feel like you're making the base game demonstrably worse to try to shove me into the cash shop. And as I said, it's really like, to me, it seems like they took the base structure, they took the idea of how Warframe monetizes their game, and they just said, how can we make this even worse and make more money off these people? Couple that with Nexon just being fresh off of getting the largest fine that the Korean FTC has ever given out in their whole history, because they were scamming customers developers out of money, basically. That leaves my trust in the company doing the right thing, being consumer friendly in any of their decisions and how they're designing and monetizing this game and tying the design of the game and the grind of the game into the monetization. My trust of them doing that by the books, it ain't very high. It was only 6 months ago they got fined $9 million. Not super confident that they're doing fine by us, right? And that they've got our best interest in mind. Not that any games company does, right? But look, with all of that said, I have no doubt that there are people enjoying this game right now, and they will be in the future. It's just not me. Like, for all the things that I do like about the game, and that was a long list. That was probably like a third of what this whole video's runtime is going to be. I do like things about this, but I dislike just enough that right now I've got zero motivation to keep playing. And that's not what I was hoping for this week. I know people say, oh, you're just rage baiter YouTuber, you're just being contrary, you're just trying to be negative, you're just trying to hate. Look at my channel. I tell you, I love and want nothing more than to just be gushing about games. And as I mentioned, I love this genre. There are a lot of what I would consider, or what people probably consider bad games. Games like Outriders, games like Defiance, games like Firefall. Maybe a lot of you haven't even heard of those games, right? But I enjoyed them. And I was kind of hoping that this was going to be it. Despite the Nexon tie-in, I was hoping that this game was going to do it. But it just really hasn't. It really hasn't. I felt bored after just a couple of days. I felt that way after a couple days in the beta, and then the second beta test that I played, and now at launch, it's the same thing. And really, ultimately, I think that problem boils down to the poor pacing of the quest design and the game's world, and that's all beyond the microtransaction discussion. Honestly, the game just feels like a worse version of Warframe, Division, or Destiny. Like a lot of games developed by Nexon, it's not the worst out there, but it's also far from the best. Oftentimes, what they do is they'll make games that are just good enough to get people in the door, get them hooked on some sort of progression loop, and then do everything in their power to get them swiping. But hey, I get it. It's a free game. If you want to check it out, by all means. If you like grinding games, this is one that you can play and you can grind, and I'm all for that. I play ARPGs, I play MMOs, I like this genre generally, except for this one. So I get it, and there's something to there being a new thing for people to check out, and that in itself can be valuable to people. But I'll also say there are better grinding games that you could play, and that I think would be it would be time better spent. I'm going to keep my eye on this one, right? This one could get better, and I get why people like it, but right now, nah, it's not for me. I spent more than enough of my time with this game already. I am all done, but by all means, feel free to enjoy it. That is all for today. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys next time.